Okay, to understand why a summer of love could happen, we need to comprehend the influences surrounding that period. Let's start with 475,000 young Americans, average age of 19, serving their country in Southeast Asia. Some are in the audience today. While these Americans were just doing what they were told, anti-war protesters back home were multiplying exponentially. How about 400,000 people outside the UN in New York, at the time the largest protest in history? That's why we call you Boom Boom. 10 years earlier, Elvis Presley served when called, but the times they were a-changing. Muhammad Ali refused to serve in 1967 and was stripped of his boxing title. But let's also look at what else is going on. Violent race riots broke out in cities such as Cleveland, Newark, and Milwaukee, but none worse than Detroit, where 7,000 National Guard were called in to restore law and order. But while all this surrounded them, or maybe because it did surround them, the young in America searched for a better way to live, for different values than the world they faced. They knew that their Ozzie and Harriet-like parents were not the role models they were seeking. They weren't giving out an adolescent no to them, just questioning that there may be other ways. What did we do back then? We chose to listen to poetry, such as that written by Ferlinghetti or Ginsberg. We listened to the words and music from such artists as Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, and Paul Simon. We played music loud and got lost in the psychedelic rhythms of bands such as the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, Big Brother, Jimi Hendrix, and so many more. We wanted to make love, not war, and give peace a chance. We were in exploitation mode, whether it was drugs, sex, organic foods, alternative medicine, alternative religions. We opened our minds to what else was out there to be tried. We grew our hair long, we donned garish garb. Paisley and tie-dye were the styles of the day. We saw the simple, peaceful, communal way of life. Given what was going on, it seemed like the youth of America were living in some sort of alternate parallel universe. One thing was for sure, a youth quake was about to erupt, and the epicenter of this youth quake was San Francisco, California. 1967, the Human Bee Inn. 30,000 people jammed the polo field in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park to celebrate the gathering of the tribe. In retrospect, some called it the beginning of the 60s. Some said a new era of consciousness was ushered in, and yet others referred to it as a Bethlehem miracle. A new world was born. But first, let's go back just 2 days in time to January 12, 1967. Yeah, pictures are pretty cool. Unbeknownst to most of us, LSD was legal in the USA until California banned it in October 1966. So on January 12, concerned San Franciscans gathered to discuss what could be done about the right they just lost. Many of the attendees were puzzled, as just south of San Francisco, in Menlo Park, the CIA were conducting LSD experiments on volunteers. One such volunteer was Ken Kesey. Kesey was so inspired by his experiences that he wrote a book about some of them. Many of you may have read this book, but most of you probably saw the movie. It starred Jack Nicholson. It was called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Kesey became a psychedelic fanatic. He would travel all over San Francisco on a flatbed truck with his followers dubbed the Merry Pranksters and conduct electric Kool-Aid acid tests. Low doses of LSD were mixed in with buckets of Kool-Aid. If you drank it and passed the test, you received a certificate. I can only imagine what the test would be and how one would pass it, but I bet some of the guys in the band know. Back to the Human Being. The gathering featured poets, speakers, and all the San Francisco bands. Some of the speakers, Dick Gregory, Jerry Rubin, Richard Alpert, and most notably, Timothy Leary. The overall message was simple: celebrate liberation, love, peace, compassion, and unity of mankind. The crowd wore costumes, reveled in music, burned incense, most dropped acid. The Bee-In influenced some of its attendees to do some great things. James Rado and Jerome Rainey felt compelled to chronicle this movement. They stayed in San Francisco and wrote a play. It debuted off-Broadway later that year. It was called Hair. Stuart Brand launched the Whole Earth catalog and would lead the counterculture to the digital age. Fortunately or unfortunately, the media covering the event focused in and extensively reported on something Timothy Leary said. It was, tune in, turn on, drop out. He invited all who wanted to join the tribe to come to San Francisco after school was out for a summer of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. As we'll find out, he got a lot of takers. In January 1967, there were about 10,000 people in Haight-Ashbury, a 15-block section of San Francisco by the southeastern edge of Golden Gate Park. Its inhabitants wore their hair long, wore buckskin jackets, or bread-colored clothes. They were dubbed hippies by San Francisco Chronicle columnist Herb Cain. That moniker's stuck. Both San Francisco city officials and the Hashberry, as the residents called it, unofficial government, the Diggers, knew an onslaught of youngsters were headed there for the summer. Of course, with a call to action of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, this swarm didn't exactly wait until summer to head there. The government understood full well that overcrowding would bring health issues, housing issues, and crime. What did they do? Not a thing. Instead, the San Francisco police actually put a sign on the Golden Gate Bridge that read, "Hippies, turn around and go home." Fortunately, there were the Diggers. The Diggers were named after 17th century English anarchists who believed everything should be shared. The Diggers were the invisible government of Hashbury who set the tone for the whole community. They wanted to start a new culture from scratch. Their idea was to put the word free in front of everything. Free food, free love, free rent, etc. And guess what? They delivered. It was said if you were new in town and walked down the street and struck up a conversation with a stranger, in minutes you could be directed to a digger who would set you up with a place to sleep, food, and if so inclined, a sexual partner. The Diggers turned Hashbury into a city within a city, a true community. They had a communications company who could print up leaflets for them in about 30 minutes. These leaflets promoted Digger values, things like love by all means, but love people, not money. They printed advice such as, if the police arrest you and take you away, yell your name out loud and as often as you can, so we will know who to bail out when we go to the bail bondsman. The Diggers founded a work co-op to help kids find jobs. They also provided empty coffee cans to local bakers who would make Digger bread in them for free, of course. It was the Diggers who more or less made the Summer of Love. They were the ones who actually coined the phrase, Summer of Love. They provided the infrastructure and many core values for that period. They were able to handle the estimated 75 to 100,000 youngsters in Hashbury that summer. San Francisco City Hall was no help. They sent in the police to conduct drug raids and health inspectors in hope of condemning hippie hostels. But here's a quote from the health inspector, fresh off of writing 16 citations to hippie pads. Conditions were not as bad as we were led to believe. Most of these kids are nice, positive kids. They believe in what they are trying to do. A quote from the underground paper, The Oracle. Our city has become the momentary focus of a worldwide spiritual awakening. The reasons for this do not matter. It is a gift from God which we may take, nourish, and treasure. The summer of love was on. no doubt that music was at the heart of San Francisco's magical transformation in the 60s. When the San Francisco bands started multiplying, music needed a sacred chamber, its magical proscenium of swirling lights and sounds, in order to resonate most deeply in the city's soul. And that place was Bill Graham's Fillmore. Bill Graham was a Holocaust orphan. Graham, at age 9, walked across Europe with his 13-year-old sister. He was put on an ocean liner in Lisbon, landed in New York, placed in an orphanage. At 18, he was drafted, sent to Korea, won a Bronze Star and Purple Heart. This granted him U.S. citizenship. He then brought 2 of his sisters to America. One ended up in San Francisco. He went to visit her, never returned to New York again. In 1965, he subleased a decrepit, rundown dance hall in a rundown part of San Francisco. He was convinced there was money to be made by promoting the local, suddenly popular rock bands. He fixed up the Fillmore and began to bring in the great San Francisco bands. All his concerts, he piped in music before and after the shows, showed cartoons, had incredible light shows, and demanded the bands begin on time. A quote from Mickey Hart, Grateful Dead drummer: "He superimposed order on this chaotic world. Yes, he was tough. Yes, he wanted to make money. But the fact of the matter is the concerts were magnificent. The shows started on time, the sound system was great, the musicians got paid, the kids had a good time. Nobody was beat up or stabbed, everyone felt safe. He was almost like a father figure of the counterculture. Everyone was drawn to him." Graham became closest to the Grateful Dead. He liked their dedication, the way Jerry Garcia would show up at 11 in the morning, the day of the gig, to rehearse and check the sound. He thought of the band as children, particularly mischievous children. Jerry Garcia and Mickey Hart were always trying to dose Graham with acid. Hart said he wouldn't take cookies from his grandmother. But one evening, when Janis Joplin was ripping up the crowd, Bill went rushing by with his ever-present clipboard, grabbed the Coke out of my hand, and took a gulp. The lip of the can had been anointed. Jerry yelled, "Bill, the road you now travel will not be a familiar one." Later that night, he started taking off his clothes as he wrapped around the gong on stage, singing, "Death Don't Have No Mercy." The music in Golden Gate Park on a sunny afternoon with acid, incense, balloons would forever be part of the San Francisco mystique. But Graham turned the Fillmore into holy ground. The Fillmore was both sanctuary and salvation. It's why people trekked to San Francisco. It all came down to the music. They weathered the cold, the cops, the scruff of the streets to stand inside the sacred wall of sound.
Chicago, New York, Detroit, it's on the same street. The typical city involved the typical daydream. Hang it up, see what tomorrow brings. Dallas, South Carolina, Houston, to New Orleans, New York, got the way to me, the good catching in our street with the true love. Most of the time he's sitting crying at home. One of these days the guy we know is going out the door, down the street all alone. The two down there, supposed to be on the whole of your hand. Out of the time, and here we go, let down. sweet Jane. She lost her spot, but you know she isn't the same. Living on red, vitamin C and cocaine. All a friend can say is in the shame. Again, sitting and staring out of the window. Got it thinking the kids will go in again. I like to get some sleep before I travel, but if you got a warrant, I guess you're gonna come in. But shut up, like a bowling pin, knock down, take away everything, like you're for me. You're sick of hanging around and you like to travel. You're tired of traveling, you want to settle down. I guess they can't be both, so try it. Get out the door and let it look all around. The lights are shining on me. All the time that the
One evening, while stoned, Slick thought of sly drug references in Alice in Wonderland and composed, of all things, a bolero. Fortunately, it was at the same time Signe Anderson, Airplane's lead singer, quit, while she brought her bolero, White Rabbit, and Somebody to Love to the airplane. The rest is history. Everyone knew the Grateful Dead lived in a large, colorful Victorian in 710 Ashbury Street. Jerry Garcia was their spiritual leader, who was known affectionately as Captain Trips. He was a brilliant person, had a voracious appetite for reading.
What? Reading?
Yeah, I know. It's something you haven't done yet. But the Dead were a playful bunch. They played on Hugh Hefner's Playboy After Dark. They dosed the coffee urn. Per Jerry Garcia, once everyone started drinking coffee, the party really started. They produced 13 studio albums, played Woodstock, as well as in front of the Pyramids, had a top 10 hit in the 80s, Touch of Grey, to which Jerry Garcia remarked, "I am appalled." In August of 1995, Jerry Garcia passed away due to complications of his heroin addiction. San Francisco City Hall flew the flag at half-mast that day, signifying the end of an era, and it truly was. In June 1966, Big Brother and the Holding Company auditioned Janis Joplin. She got the job, but Janis had issues. Despite being an incredibly intelligent person, she just could not deal with her emotions and insecurities. When puberty hit Janis, she gained weight and was stricken with an unflattering complexion. At the University of Texas, a fraternity voted her ugliest man on campus. That sent her packing to San Francisco, where she tried to make it as a folk singer. She worked hard at it, but became addicted to amphetamines and returned back home to Port Arthur, Texas to clean up. When she returned to San Francisco in 1966, she was a self-proclaimed white girl from Texas, singing the blues who wanted to be Otis Redding. But the taunting in high school and college left a bottomless hole in her gut that she was forever trying to fill with men, women, whiskey, and drugs. Her sexual appetite for both men and women was legendary. She was rumored to have slept with every musician in the Bay Area, except Jerry Lee Lewis, with whom she had a fist fight. Eventually, heroin crept into Big Brother, as well as Janice, which created a downward spiral for all. She went on, though, to create a hit album called Pearl. Unfortunately, it was a hit posthumously, as heroin claimed her life on October 4th, 1970. Moby Grape was a band expected to soar higher than any other, according to music critics. Their sound crossed the harmonies of the Byrds with the ballsy rage of the Rolling Stones. They were musicians. They honed a slashing, symphonic sound composed of intricate five-part harmonies and three distinctive guitar styles. When they played, it would not be unusual to see Neil Young, Steve Stills, Janis Joplin, David Crosby in the audience. But due to the manias and drug addictions of the band members, they burned out just as quickly as they were formed. But maybe we can get these guys to play a song from Moby Grape.
Can I get another drink, Paul?
Michael?
Alcohol for the band, please.
Yeah. And the narrator. Okay. There we go. One has to wonder why San Francisco was bestowed the honor of being the heartbeat of the Summer of Love. Why did the city have the benefit of the Diggers, or be their birthplace of acid rock, or have the young from all over the world come in search of peace and love? No one will ever really know, but we do know, out there in the cosmic world, there is the yin and the yang. And San Francisco did not escape the eventual coming down, if you will, from its Summer of Love high. On October 6, 1967, the Diggers organized a Death of the Hippie funeral procession. The Diggers truly believed the Summer of Love and its ideals were over. They believed the media attention turned the hate into a tourist attraction, and now young people arriving were not interested in the hippie lifestyle, only drug use. Historians would say the Diggers were about 2 years early, as the most high-profile example of peace and love was 500,000 people at Woodstock in August 1969. San Francisco, however, was about to go into a tailspin. From the zebra murders to the Zodiac Killer to the Patty Hearst ordeal to its affiliation with James Jones in Jonestown to the AIDS crisis, San Francisco was burnt down to its core. Could it find its way back?
Go turn around, go back down, back the way you came. Babylon's been laid to waste, Egypt's buried in her shame. Her mighty men are all beaten down, her knees are falling in no waste. Oh God, Father, man, broken in the dust again. Turn around, go back down, back the way you came. Terror is on every side, though the leaders hide his fame. For you place your faith in fire, and by your faith shall be repaid. Oh God, my man, broken in the dust again. Turn around, go back down, back the way you came. If the curse of God is laid, get Babylon, that mighty city, rich in treasure, wide in fame. Oh God, my man, broken in the dust again. The beach shall cause your towers to fall, make of you a pyre of flame. For you who dwell on many waters, rich in treasure, wide in fame. You bow unto your God of gold, your pride might shall be your shame. For only God can lead his people back into the earth again. Oh God, Father, man, breaking in the dust again. And holy mountains he restored. Have mercy on thy people. Thy people, Lord.
With San Francisco battling its way out of the AIDS epidemic, if any city needed a positive focal point, they were it. The San Francisco 49ers were the laughingstock of the NFL, going 2-14 after being bought by Eddie DiBartolo 1 year earlier. His son, now the general manager, brought in an untested, unconventional coach from Stanford named Bill Walsh. Both DiBartolo and Walsh got their big break when they drafted a quarterback from Notre Dame in the 4th round named Joe Montana, and an unknown receiver from Clemson named Dwight Clark. Montana became the starting quarterback and made Walsh's innovative West Coast offense hum. The 49ers recorded a miraculous 13-3 regular season record. The city and the team took on an us against the world attitude. To make it to the Super Bowl, though, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, stood in their way. With seconds left in that game, a Montana to Clark pass and catch pulled out a 28-27 victory. Cities, like people, have souls. They can be broken by terrible events, but they can be healed. It was just a game. It was just one catch, but sometimes that's enough. San Francisco is back. Did the 1967 Summer of Love dream ever end? The mere fact that Bruce Herman, Bill Self, Joe Capelli, and the Mulligans were all excited to be part of this event speaks volumes. And of course, all of you out there. We are all in some way a legacy of the Summer of Love. Let's look more closely. That summer was a breeding ground for most of the social movements that have come since then. The women's movement, gay rights movement, ecology, economic equality, pacifism. In fact, so many ideas coming out of that summer have been integrated into society that one would never believe it was from 50 years ago. Organic food, local food, yoga, alternative medicine, recycling, the importance of the human body, even yogurt was popularized that summer. Would you believe 50 years ago that medical marijuana would be commonplace, or that marijuana would be legalized in several states?
What?
January 1st.
You got it.
That's on my calendar.
We still have a healthy questioning of authority. We are not afraid to show our bodies. Well, maybe not this audience, but some of those younger than us. And we understand the advantages of a smaller carbon footprint. There are those, including our own Bruce Herman, who believe Silicon Valley evolved from a summer of love. Skeptical? Some say, including Steve Jobs, the Whole Earth catalog created by Stuart Brand in 1967 was Google in paperback form, but invented 35 years before. The catalog was comprised of product reviews. It did not sell, it informed. It was the internet, complete with blogs, long before the internet was conceived. Some have said that the deployment of social media on a global scale, pioneered by Facebook, was foreshadowed by what took place on the corner of Haight and Ashbury Streets. Who knows? But we do know that all happened in a 15 square block corner of San Francisco in the summer of 1967. It was billed as the summer of love, yet its creators did not employ a single publicist or craft a media plan. Yet the phenomenon washed over America like a tidal wave, ushering in a series of liberations and awakenings that irreversibly changed our way of life. Oh, almost forgot one very important legacy. That would be music. Unlike the songs of today, the music of 1967 came from a place of authenticity. The fact that we are listening to it 50 years later says it all.
When the truth is found to be alive, and all the joy within you, don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Wouldn't you love somebody to love? You may find somebody to love. You want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Wouldn't you love somebody to love? You better find somebody to love. Your eyes are saying, I'm saying, I'm not saying. Yeah, but in my head, baby, I'm afraid of the way. Don't you want somebody?
few seconds. In June 1967, Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones boarded a flight from London's Heathrow Airport, destined for a quaint oceanside community, renowned for its jazz festival and his portrayal in the work of a novelist, John Steinbeck. Accompanied by a black American guitarist scheduled to make his U.S. debut, yes, they were destined for Monterey. A few months earlier, Alan Harriser, a renowned weed supplier to the music industry, inspired by the Monterey Jazz Festival, decided to put on a pop music festival. However, he quickly realized he was over his head and turned to John Phillips of the Mamas and Papas and Lou Adler, a noted record producer, to take over the project. In just 7 weeks, Phillips, Adler, and their crack team whipped together an unprecedented buffet of sights and sounds that continue to resonate like a distant echo of another, more magical time. According to Lou Adler, the idea was to provide the best of everything: sound equipment, sleeping and eating accommodations, transportation, services that had never been provided for artists before Monterey. There was a quid pro quo for all these services, though. The artists were to play for free. Phillips and Adler, right? Don't tell John Barrick if he's here. Phillips and Adler knew this would not go over well with the artist managers, so they organized the board of governors consisting of Mick Jagger, Brian Wilson, Paul Simon, Paul McCartney, Art Garfunkel, Donovan, and Smokey Robinson. As one manager said, when you get a call from Paul McCartney asking for you to play, you can't say no. The festival spanned 3 days, advertised to be happy, be free, wear flowers, bring bells. Tickets cost between $3 and $6.50, included more than 30 acts, and attracted about 90,000 people. 50 years later, the festival still is cited for some historic performances. Janis Joplin's rendition of Ball and Chain, Hendrix lighting his guitar on fire and smashing it after playing Wild Thing, The Who turning the stage into what looked like a wild Saturday night at a bar in Kabul. But the performer who really rocked it was Otis Redding. With charisma, dynamism, and intense turbocharged vocals, he succeeded in knocking out the love crowd, as he called it. Unknown to many, Monterey Pop was a non-profit event where all proceeds funded the Monterey International Pop Festival Foundation. Due to the financial acumen of Lou Adler, the foundation is still making grants 50 years later. Monterey Pop laid out the roadmap for Woodstock, which came 2 years later, but it will always be remembered for featuring debut performances of bands that would shape the history of rock and affect popular culture from that day forward.
Some of them came and played, others gave flowers away, yes they did. Down in Monterey, young God smiled upon the crowd, the music being born of love. Children danced night and day, religion was being born down in Monterey. The birds and the airplane did fly over Ravi Shankar's music made me cry. The Who exploded into firelight. United Colors music was like a Why don't you fade away? Don't try to think what we all say. Not trying to cause a big sensation. Just talking about my generation. My generation, baby. Try to think what we all say. Not trying to cause a big sensation. Just talking about my generation. My generation, baby. Yeah.
Bruce, Bill, and myself pitched this show to Rachel Carter. She had no idea what the Summer of Love was or who any of the bands were. But she believed in us and got us to state. So thank you. And I personally want to thank Ann Musson and Beth Pagnillo for their administrative help. Now, if you've never worked with J.J. West before, you're in for a treat when you do. He has been a great, great partner. He's been on top of everything. His special events director, Can Do, Kadisha Coley-Mason, another amazing person. And of course, the fabulous wait staff, who always do a special job at MPCC, except they're forgetting the band. You guys were thirsty up here. An amazing thing to me was that the Mulligans had roadies. And so we want to thank Eric and Jesse. Yeah, well, you know what they are. Eric has done an incredible job mixing the sound. Thank you, sir. We also have a person that did the fabulous AV work, the light show in the back, the videos, the sound system. His name is Nathan Omernick from Bay Media. I don't know where he is, but Nathan, thank you. We've had Jacob Calderon, although I haven't seen him lately, going around as our videographer. Thank you.
Right here.
Okay. Right in front of you, bud. No wonder he's in front of you. Okay. On the stage, being named the band leader isn't all fame and glory. In fact, it's a ton of responsibility and very hard work. No band leader could have worked harder in preparation for tonight. Let's hear it for Bill Self. We would not be here tonight unless someone actually had a vision or idea to do something like this. This person believed in this project intensely, believed that it would resonate with all of you, and would not stop until this vision was turned into a reality. How about a thunderous round of applause for Bruce Boom Boom Herman?
Only place look like a rolling sea. I know it's sorrow.
Song, which we think is the real finale for this evening. It represents the song for all of us of the 1960s, so we're going to get all the voices up here and hope you enjoy it.
Oh,
Everybody get some dinner. We'll see how the evening goes. Thanks very much. Thanks for coming out.